Everyone, and welcome to the Good Moves Career and Advocacy webinar. I'm Susan from the Good Moves team at SCVO, and we're also joined by my colleague Mary. So if you're not aware, Good Moves is the recruitment site run by SCVO for the charity not-for-profit and sector in Scotland, and we advertise around 100 new job opportunities a week. As part of our service to job seekers, we also provide information on the variety of careers in the sector and how to access different job opportunities. Advocacy roles account for around 1/3 of the jobs on the Good Moves website. And to help you find out more about this interesting and varied area of work, we're joined by speakers today from Lomond and Argyll Advocacy Service, Glasgow and Clyde Rate Crisis, and Govan Community Project. We do ask that you remain on mute during the sessions. You'll have the opportunity to put any questions at the end of each presentation, and these can be submitted anonymously in the chat or by raising your hand during the session. Just to let you know, the session will be recorded and emailed to everyone who's registered and will also be available on the Good Moves YouTube. Please keep your camera off if you don't want to be recorded. So I'd now like to introduce our first speaker, Charlie Coggrave from Lomond and Argyll Advocacy Service.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, and I hope this is of some interest to folk. And I'm also hoping I can make the technology work, because not always my strong point. So let's see if we can manage now. Nice. Hopefully that's working at your end. Excellent. Thank you for the thumbs up. So my name is Charlie. I'm CEO of Lomond and Argyll Advocacy Service. You'll hear, as Susan said, a chunk about advocacy today. Perhaps one of the slight differences from what we do to some of the other presenters today is we are classified as an independent advocacy organisation, in the sense that we don't do anything other than advocacy, and that's a kind of different relationship sometimes, neither better nor worse than others, but something a bit different to some of the other presentations you'll hear today. And of course, having test run that is now not going to move forward as we hoped. Size to self and says, let's try that one instead. Right, forgive me. Try it one more time, see if that works now. No, it does not.
Everyone, sorry, everyone, just bear with us. We have the presentations here. Oh, that's you.
That's got me there. Sorry, Susan. Thank you for your patience. Right, so independent advocacy, this is a quote from one dates it, the fact that it was called the Scottish Executive still. Independent advocacy, a crucial element in social justice. It's a way to ensure that everyone matters and that everyone is heard, including people who are at risk of exclusion and people who have particular difficulties in making their views known. Not to big ourselves up, but that is a really important definition. I think if there's one thing I would describe independent advocacy as being, it's about allowing people to have their voices heard and their rights upheld. And in one sense, that in and of itself is what independent advocacy is. So just a little bit about why does advocacy matter? And I'm saying this in the sense that if folk here can see something of themselves or their passions or their gifts, that might give you a sense of maybe this is something for you. This is about safeguarding people who are vulnerable, often ones who are discriminated against and whom services find it difficult to serve. As a practical example of that, we have two projects running. One is solely about supporting adults who are challenged by addictions and substance use, and is not solely for people in recovery. And one is about people who are liberated from prison, both of whom I would argue are groups that can often be marginalized and not given the same level of respect as others in this society. It is about empowering people who need a stronger voice, helping them express their needs and make their own decisions. It is about accessing information. It is not about giving advice. It is about giving information, not advice, and allowing people to explore options and make their views and wishes. the number of times we have conversations with people and tell them that they are able to do A, B, or C that they didn't even know was within their gift. It is about helping ensure services are designed and delivered from the perspective of people using those services and their carers. And we hope to speak for people who are unable to do so for themselves. For anybody who's particularly interested in that, there is a whole raft of information about what's called non-instructed advocacy for people who don't have capacity or don't have the ability to express themselves. So, as I've said, advocacy is about giving people a stronger voice. It should help people to speak up for themselves, to then defend their interests and claim their rights, to ensure their voice is heard, to understand what options is open to them, to make their views and wishes known, and importantly, is a legal right for anyone with a mental disorder. I'm going to immediately caveat that saying that mental disorder is not a phrase I'm very comfortable with. It is the one that is in the law. In the Mental Health Care and Treatment Act of 2004, if I remember the year correctly, states that anybody with a mental disorder has a right to independent advocacy. That's often misinterpreted as being solely when somebody is detained under the Act. That right is there for anybody with a mental disorder, and a mental disorder is classed as a mental illness, a learning disability, a brain injury, Alzheimer's and elderly dementia, and a raft of other things under that. In fact, probably the majority of the population of Scotland have a right in law to advocacy. One of the important things about independent advocacy, and as I've said, it probably is a difference between this presentation and a couple of ones you might see later. To be members of the Scottish Independent Advocacy Alliance, we need to be structurally, economically, and psychologically independent of all agencies, including funders. That does mean that what somebody says to an advocacy organisation stays with us, and it doesn't get routinely passed to anybody else. We are there only to provide advocacy with no other service, mission, or links. It's just the thing we do. It is not about one particular area. And as I've said, this isn't particularly saying this is good or bad. It's just a point of difference. And I'd note that social workers and polices, and being a social care worker for a long time myself, have often said we advocate, and we can. But you're not independent. And if you work for a large care organisation, it's very difficult to advocate against your employer. That's particularly true for social workers, say, who might be asking somebody for a larger budget. Our only function is to be there for vulnerable adults and to assist them to have their voices heard and their rights upheld. The organisation I lead only works with people aged 16 and over, and there is a significant gap for advocacy for children across Scotland. So as I've said, we're separate from services such as health and social work. We don't have split loyalties. We only see things from the client's point of view. And that means that we can challenge decisions without compromise or fear. So it's regular for us to advise people that we don't agree with what they're doing. So a little bit about who we work for. We cover the whole of Argyll and Bute and Western Bartonshire. There are, I think, 24 people work for this organisation. Pretty large area to cover across that number of people. We work in the community, in care homes, in hospitals, in community service groups. We have some joint advocacy and facilitated some group and self-advocacy as well, all of which I find really interesting areas of work and very different. I think that one of the things that you would find working in this area is it's the old phrase of no 2 days are the same, and there's plenty of different challenges. We provide a function in Western Bartonshire and in Argyll and Bute, which has been funded by CORA. It's a rights-based advocacy approach. We're using the rights, respect and recovery triangle. It's not a triangle, is it? But you can see it on the right. And we offer a lived experience advocacy service. All of our advocates have direct personal experience of using substances or a family member or the impact of that. And we work within the MAT standards. I don't know if that's something people are familiar with, but the Scottish Government have had a medically assisted treatment standard for some time. It's one of the areas that people don't know they've got a right to. For instance, folk in recovery have a right to same-day prescribing. You can turn up at a service and say, I need help today. And that's so crucially important for anybody who's woken up that day and said, today is the day I'm going to change my life. But commonly that service is not available across Scotland, despite it being a right under the MAT standards. For us in our core advocacy role, most of our focus is on those in priority need who are subject to legislative interventions. That's mainly detention or treatment under the Mental Health Act, adults with incapacity legislation, adult support and protection legislation. For anybody who's not familiar with those particular bits of law, all of them can take away what we regard as our day-to-day rights pretty much instantly. You can be detained under the Mental Health Act and locked up without any clear end date to that, without having committed a crime, without going to court. That can be just done. You can have your ability to make independent decisions removed under adults with incapacity legislation. You can be directed where you want to live and who you can associate with. So these are really powerful bits of law. And usually an independent advocate is the only person in the room who is there solely for the person that this is pointed at. It's really important to have information and connections to the right services, to supports and access to community-based groups. It's really important that folk understand their human rights and that they are supported in claiming and defending these. If you are in hospital as an elderly person with dementia, it is really difficult to claim and assert your rights. You need help to do that. And to ensure that people are treated fairly, are respected and empowered to make decisions about access to health services, and including not accessing health services and other supports and services they feel they would benefit. And we don't work in a specific care group model. So if any of this has been of interest, something about what it takes to work or volunteer for us, we do have a small number of volunteer posts available, and we're looking to opening that up again in a couple of months. But there is no previous experience required. You don't have to have done advocacy to be an advocacy worker. It is really helpful if folk have got some experience of the sector. And by that, I mean understanding things like what a care manager does, what a social worker does, what a nurse does. But often that is as limited as having perhaps an elderly relative who has gone into residential care. The key skills are your values and your life experience. Are you willing to commit yourself? Are you the kind of person who can stand up for somebody else when you've got 10 people paid a lot more than you sat in front of you telling you that you're wrong? So that commitment to hold people's rights, to understand the power imbalances that are redolent throughout social care and social work and health services, and to represent the voice of the service user without judging them. This isn't about whether you agree with them or not. This is about their voice. We offer a lot of training and support on the job, including putting people through qualificatory training. There's an extensive induction and shadowing process and an incremental development role. Most of the roles in our organisation are part-time, including myself. I think we have one full-time member of staff, and generally they're between opportunities between about 15 to 30 hours a week. The full-time salaries start at 26,880 and go up to 29,947 on this year. And you do need to be able to travel independently and be confident to work alone. Often folk are home-based. I'm currently sat in the office today, but most people work from home as part of their role, but also to be able to act as part of a team. It's probably important also to know if you're also thinking actually as advocacy service would be good for me or for my mum or for my neighbour. We do operate a waiting list. There's a significant queue for people. To manage that, we prioritise those on our waiting list. And those who are under those statutory interventions are our top priority, and we will come to first because there are often immovable timescales for them. And for other referrals, we often seek to triage and respond. Sometimes that's about signposting people. And finally, once we're able to allocate an advocate, it's really important they're able to meet the individual and begin to understand their views. often takes more than one visit. I say that in the sense that some organisations do this remotely and can hook into a video call like this one. We operate right across Argyll and Bute, including all the islands, and we make it a point that we will visit people. I don't think it is an acceptable form of advocacy for somebody with dementia to be passed an iPad and say, could you engage with this person on the screen? Because I don't feel that is an appropriate response. Very briefly around adult support and protection. How am I doing for time? Somebody give me a thumbs down if I'm getting too long. No restrictions, so I'm keeping going. We have a role under adult support and protection processes, a statutory role for an advocate to be involved or available. And we do remind people constantly that it takes more than 48 hours for us to meet somebody and gain confidence and for them to be able to tell us what it is they want. And we also have a role in large-scale inquiries and other significant changes. Advocacy is often being asked to assist on consultation to older people services, where local authorities have got us involved in a strategic role. Independent advocacy is on the move and on the change. Established, as I said, 2003 under the Act, but the Scottish Government are reviewing under mental health law and under the National Care Service whether advocacy should be more widely available to people and whether the statutory right should be reflected within them. Nationally, as for everybody, funding is a challenge for advocacy. But there's no strategic plan for most services across most HSCPs we work in. And our care group funding is aside from the stuff we do with Cora and spots the typo there, it's generic. So you're pretty much, if you're over 16, you can get a service from us. And then the brief part about the law, I feel my sense is I'm going too much into the detail around this, so I'm going to skip over these last two parts. Happy to take questions on this at the end. I think that's probably a more practical thing. Perhaps to finish on what it isn't, because the boundary of the role is really important. We don't make decisions on a client's behalf. We don't make a judgment about what's in their best interest. We don't give our own opinions or follow our own agenda. We don't give advice. We only give information. We don't reveal or seek information without the agreement of the client. We don't undertake assessments. We don't go out and do things to people. We go out and meet people and help them do what they want done. And we never act without the permission of the client, except when the client or someone else is at significant risk. There is ever an indication that somebody is at harm. We have a duty to act and to report either to the police or adult support and protection or as appropriate. But that is a particularly high bar. So hopefully that's helpful. I'll see if I can make stop sharing work better than I did when I practiced it earlier. It looks like I can. I'll happily mute myself and see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Charlie. I think that's really helped my understanding of advocacy, and I really liked your explanation there about it being an area where you don't need qualifications and experience to get into. We've been in quite a lot of career fairs recently, and we're speaking to a lot of people that are just kind of stuck in that cycle of they can't get their first foot in the ladder. So it's just refreshing to see an area of work where that isn't the case. So, do you know if there's any questions in the chat, Mary?
Nope, none there at all.
Any questions in the group? No. There will be the chance again to ask questions at the end. So we'll move on now to Glasgow and Clyde rape crisis. So we have Grace Morton and Ashley McNair. So they'll be telling a bit more about their work and the career paths of some members of their team.
Well, hopefully you can see. This one. Sorry, here we go. There you go. Is that okay for everyone? Oh, good. Yes, great. Excellent. Hi, everybody.
we've got a wee couple of changes to the names because there's 4 of us here, but obviously myself, I'm Laura, I'm one of the advocacy workers in the community and justice team, and Tahira is the helpline coordinator. So you might hear some voices and my lips don't move, that there's maybe some input from some of the other members of the team. So welcome, I hope that you find this informative. So a wee bit about Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis. We were formed a way back in 1976 by 2 Glasgow women who, following sexual violence incidents, became aware that there wasn't anywhere really safe for women to access support, to come together and share their experiences. And so we started out basically in probably what could be described as a little broom cupboard. Way back in
I sent you an email, like I got a, not email, I got a
Oh, sorry, we're getting some feedback coming through.
Thanks, it's sorted now. You're good to go.
Okay, sorry. So as I say, little broom cupboard back in Glasgow, and started off with the 2 of the women, volunteer based. It then grew and we obtained some office space in Bell Street. To the present day, the team now consists of over 40 women working and volunteering at Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis. We have new premises in the heart of the city centre. There are 5 different teams, all working towards the same goals with the same values for women and girls. The 5 teams, so the helpline is probably the first point of contact. A lot of our workers have come through the helpline. Ashley and Grace that are here with me today are going to speak a wee bit more about that because they've came through the helpline, the volunteering network. Core teamwork, supporting women with emotional support, behavioural, practical. Ruby work with BAME, Black Asian Minority Ethnic Community. So a lot of their work involves home office, advocating and supporting women. Support to Report, which I'm going to speak about a wee bit later on in detail, works with the criminal justice system. So we work supporting survivors through the criminal justice system. We are the only team out of those 5 that work with male survivors. And we also have prevention that go out and do workshops with young people in schools, universities, youth clubs, and they do workshops around topics like consent, etc. So a wee bit about the volunteer training. I'm going to let Grace take over because she's came through this.
So yeah, I've just come through the volunteer training and I've just started on the support to report team with Laura and Ashley. So the volunteer training for Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis is very comprehensive. It lasts around 10 weeks and volunteers develop an understanding of many complex issues related to gender-based violence. Covers loads of different important themes, things that might come up on the helpline when you're talking to people in crisis. And this is especially useful, obviously, if you haven't had any prior experience. So to come through the volunteer training first is an amazing way to kind of gain an understanding of what Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis do. And yeah, it gives a strong sense of their values, of our voice, being compassionate, respectful, clear, understanding. And yeah, it gives the volunteer training just gives a really good sense of who Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis are as an organisation. And in terms of getting jobs, especially advocacy jobs, I felt like the volunteer training really gave me invaluable skills for speaking to people, understanding what people might be going through, what they might need from advocates. And yeah, lots of really great support as well. The team is lovely, really, really nice. Every time I came into the training, it was nice seeing different people's faces and coming doing the helpline in the office. People are always very welcoming. And then I also find the training to be quite empowering in terms of all of the really valuable things you learn about and ways of interacting with people. And it can, well, I didn't expect it to lead to me to getting a job so soon, which is lovely because I've been hunting on Good Moves. I've been refreshing that page multiple times. So yeah, it's like going through the volunteer training kind of really helped me develop, like realize how I could get a job in an advocacy role. So it's really valuable. And yeah, so our helpline is mainly ran by volunteers, and it's open Monday to Friday, 11 a.m. till 2 p.m. And then we're not open on a Friday evening, but all the other evenings, Monday to Thursday, is 5:30 till 7:30. And as I said already, it's mainly ran by volunteers, so people giving their own time to come and make sure this really vital part of our organisation keeps going.
So our advocacy role. So there are 7 members of the team. We've just recently had 3 new workers, Grace and Ash, who have come through the volunteering network, and Nicole, who's not here today, but she came through probably Good Moves advert where we advertise the post. So a wee bit about our advocacy. So within, we are called Support to Report, but we work within justice and community in the wider team. And we work with male and female survivors, young women aged 13 and over. And we support survivors through the criminal justice process. So we are sort of best described as like a sort of safety net from beginning to end of the process. So from first disclosure, given a statement to the police, right through to court and post-court, and then signposting to other.
Relax.
We're having some issues again with some feedback coming through. We okay?
You're good, yeah, that's it sorted.
So support with giving statements. So we would advocate on survivors' behalf of where they wanted to give the statements, who they wanted to give the statements to. So a choice of if survivors would like 2 female officers, a male and a female, or 2 male officers. We can determine where they give their statement. So we have rooms purposely made for giving statements here at the centre, where women can come and have a safe, neutral environment to be able to give their statements to the police. We can also attend police offices, or we can also attend like actual suites that the police have specifically to be able to give statements. We work quite closely. We have a partnership with the DRIU, which is the Divisional Rape Investigation Unit. So we work very closely with Glasgow, East Renfrewshire, North Lanarkshire, and Dumbartonshire. So we have partnerships with those divisions, and we work quite closely in being able to obtain updates. So advocating for what goes on with an investigation, what your survivor should expect, what should be expected of them. And because of working quite closely with them, we get to meet like all the different officers on a weekly, monthly basis, and keep up to date with changes going on at their end of things, as well as updating them with our sort of changes. We can attend different processes that go on within the criminal justice system. So we have a Viper, which is a fancy name for the old ID parades. We attend precognitions. Survivors can bring people with them, like family members, to wait with them. But because of the partnerships that we have, we are actually able to be in when these precognitions or Vipers are taking place, albeit that when you're present at these meetings, you are a sort of silent witness, but we would advocate beforehand, that a survivor has a worker with them, that they're, you know, given all the choices, all the information that they need before they attend. We also cover special measures, which is how someone gives their evidence in court. And we, again, are able to be in the courtroom, sitting in the dock, not in the dock, but next to the dock, when a survivor is given their evidence. Due to this, being able to be court support, we would advocate, you know, that women have a separate or a central witness room of their own, that they are able to bring, you know, their family members, anybody that wants to, you know, stay with them during the trial. We also have a partnership with VIA, which is Victim Advice and Information, and we can arrange special entrances to come into the court where you are not coming in contact with the perpetrator, and we can organise transport, travel warrants, a visit to the court before the trial takes place, so that your survivor can become familiar with all the different aspects of who sits where, what's expected of them, how they present their evidence. And then we would also support women through a commission hearing, which is a wee bit different from going to court. There's a new building, Atlantic Quay, that's been specially designed for these hearings. It's very informal. Everything is videoed. So it's video evidence that is then played at trial. And then we would support and advocate for women following a trial, at sentencing, and then signposting from there. So it's although it is very much, you know, looking at the criminal justice process, there's obviously lots of other issues that come into your day-to-day work, and so we could be advocating for a survivor on behalf of like housing, homelessness, addiction. So there's lots of different aspects, but that would be the main role of someone in our advocacy team at the moment. So another wee bit about like, how did you get to where you are now? So I've worked here for 6 years. Previous to that, I worked in Archway. But going back to like experience, I went to college and I also went to uni. But I think that anybody that watching thinking, oh, you know, I don't have these qualifications, a big focus on women coming to work at Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis is on, you know, your values and your attitudes, you know, your life experience, how you are able to interact with people. If you can talk, you know, and engage with folk, then that's one of the big qualities that, you know, that you can have. So my background has obviously been in a lot of care, social care sort of environments. I worked in drug rehabs, I worked in street teams. But as I say, we all have the same sort of values and able to interact with folks. So don't let the fact, you know, sometimes people think some of, you know, like, oh, I don't have those skills, you know, it's working in crisis. But really in your everyday life, you know, there's crisis, you think on your feet, you know, so sometimes, you know, it's about just thinking, well, I don't maybe have the skills in relation to, like, you know, the sexual violence side of things, but I'm able to, like, you know, work things out. I'm able to, you know, like work in crisis or problems. So there isn't a big like sort of focus on, like, you know, qualifications, degrees or whatever. It is helpful, but I think it's more about, you know, your own personal values and attitudes and life skills.
So yeah, we just thought quickly of some values. So we'll just respect one another, show support and understanding, respect the values of the organisation. As Laura was saying, values are a really important thing coming and working here. Keep in line with GDPR to workers, survivors, keep their information safe and secure at all times. being positive and professional, a willingness to learn from and adapt to the organisation and other workers, understanding boundaries for yourself and towards staff and survivors, and your attitude is obviously very important when supporting people and yourself. I think, yeah, we've covered
I think
this.
so.
Yeah.
I covered some
Yeah.
of that. So
Which is great.
just again, you know, that no qualifications are needed. You have the ability to learn and grow. You know, there's training, responsible for your own training, but also lots of training opportunities, good communication skills, approachability. If you're ever thinking about coming to work for Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis, I'm not just bumming it up. It really is a fabulous place to work. There's a real sense of, you know, friendship, loyalty. Everybody is looking to, you know, have the same goals. It's not about I have a degree, you don't. Everybody is just working towards, you know, like the goals of for women and girls. It's very supportive. Self-care is always important. We have external supervision that we are given a budget of, I think it's £50 every month to go and spend on self-care. So it could be hair, it could be massage, it could be reflexology. So there's a big focus on the work that we do. It's very, you know, it can be very emotionally draining, but there's a big focus on self-care and keeping yourself well.
I think we've kind of covered a lot of this as well. So just like keeping your CV updated, checking Good Moves a lot, and yeah, getting involved with things like the volunteer training, cover notes. When writing a cover note, make sure it relates to the skills you have. But again, like Laura was saying, remember that life skills are just so valuable to mention, especially in roles like this. And yeah, application tips, clear, honest answers, respect yourself. It's quite hard applying for jobs, so that believing in yourself is so important. And in interview tips, clear responses, be yourself, maintain a positive professional attitude. Remember that organizations need us. And if asked at the end, if you have any questions, reply with something you've learned, you may want to learn more about, showing initiative and research you've done prior to your interview. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. So it's great to hear about your work, kind of different roles past into working with you, and also reflecting how the sector can be a great employer. Our salaries might not be that of the private sector, but it's more than just a job, and you do tend to have good employers that look after you. So any questions at the moment for Glasgow and Clyde Rape Crisis?
Yeah, there's someone asking if you're currently hiring or looking for any volunteers.
Yeah, so we're going to start another round of volunteer training in September this year. To hear
pass on information.
Yeah,
We can pass on them informations after with the web link as well. Then that way they can just kind of email me directly, and we can have a chat about that then.
Okay. In terms of paid roles, is there anything that might be coming up, or just to keep an eye out for?
Yeah.
I think just to keep an eye out, because we are expanding, but you know, we started at 2, we're now at 40. We're hoping to get to like 140, probably not this year, but you know, we're looking. So yeah, so always just like, you know, keep a wee eye on Good Moves for the teams like expanding.
I would also say just a wee foot in the door, the volunteer training would probably potentially get first offer for paid jobs. So get your training, and then potentially you would maybe get a wee paid role out of it.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no other questions, I'll pass over from Tracy. She's from Govan Community Project, and their work involved providing advocacy and casework services for refugees and asylum seekers in Glasgow.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. And fingers crossed the screen sharing still works. Everybody see that okay? Okay, so we are Govan Community Project, and we are working, I don't know if the screen, can you let me know if the slides are moving, because it's
Yeah, great. So our mission is that we live in a community that's fair and inclusive to everybody, allowing everyone to flourish and contribute to Scottish society as an equal member of the community. We work primarily with people seeking asylum and members of the refugee community to achieve social justice, build community and support people to flourish. And we support individuals and families in the asylum and refugee community with a particular focus on those who are still being impacted by the UK government's hostile environment of asylum policy. And we offer a holistic range of services, which include advice and advocacy, offering practical support, such as food support, digital support, help with clothing and baby packs. And through our community work, we support several groups. And we also have an interpreting service, which generates some income for the charity as well, and also provides some employment opportunities for people who speak different languages once they have the right to work. So our services are kind of split into two areas of anti-destitution support. People who are on Home Office support are expected to live on just over £7 a day. If they're being accommodated in a hotel by the Home Office, they are given the massive amount of £8 a week to spend on any other expenses they may have, like bus travel, phone top-ups, clothing, and things like that. So poverty destitution is a huge part of the work that we cover. And this is done through our advice and advocacy service, as who provide a range of supports for people in the asylum process. We don't do a lot of casework with people who have been granted their refugee status, because the Scottish Refugee Council do most of that move on support, and we just work in partnership with them and would signpost people onto them. Our food support is providing people with kind of pay it forward vouchers for local community food pantries, to allow people to have a little bit more choice and dignity over the food that they're accessing. We are members of the National Data Bank and support people with digital inclusion. Digital poverty is a huge issue for the communities we're supporting, and lots of other practical support, like we have partnerships with Refugee to help people with clothing and other items, with a local charity called Maslow's who do the same sort of work, with several children's organisations to help people access baby packs and prams, buggies, things like that as well. And we signpost to other services where needed. And on the community side of our support, we run English classes, we have a men and a women's group, a homework club which supports the children whose parents' English language perhaps isn't at a level that they're able to support them with their homework while they're adapting to a new Scottish education system. So the homework club provides that one-to-one support for children and families. We have a bike library. We have a wellbeing group, which is the newest element of our service, which will be supporting people to learn to understand and recognise mild mental health issues and how to self-manage and develop coping strategies for those. We have a weekly community welcome meeting where people who are newly arrived in Glasgow can come and find out a bit more about not just what we do, but what other services in Govan do. And we have guest speakers come along to that as well. We have 2 community action research groups which provide platforms for people with lived experience to use their personal experience to influence change. And we have a range of volunteering opportunities for people as well. So our advice and advocacy service is fairly young. It's probably only about 7 to 8 years old, and is something that just kind of developed organically as When Community Project grew as an organisation, and as hostile environment policies became more hostile, there were more people looking for a bit of support. So the advice and advocacy service we offer is quite specialist because it focuses primarily on supporting individuals in the asylum process to know, understand and access their rights and entitlements. A bulk of the advice work is around submitting asylum support claims to the Home Office, chasing up the government contracted bodies who are meant to be processing the claims, challenging delays in these, which are going against the rights and deadlines that they're supposed to be meeting to support people, challenging negative decisions that are made, and supporting appeals against negative decisions, and advising those who are experiencing destitution of any potential routes out of destitution for them. And often that will be around liaison with solicitors to explore if there's any evidence to boost a claim, or to appeal, or to go through a judicial review. Our advocacy work has quite a wide scope, from accompanying individuals to appointments if they need it, and we've certainly found that when we have had advocacy workers doing that, it's amazing the difference in how people are sometimes treated if there's somebody else there who has English as their first language. And it sometimes reduces the amount of prejudice that people experience as well. Sometimes it will be around applying for crisis packs, supporting people to register with GPs and health services, and applying to college are a lot of the main things, but it's kind of different every day, just depending on what people are presenting. So we have found in our journey of that service developing some challenges in recruiting people to the advice and advocacy role, not just in our organisation, but across the refugee sector in Scotland. There has been a bit of a gap in the talent pool for this sort of advice. Partly this has probably been a legacy of the pandemic, because prior to the pandemic, we would have quite a few casework volunteers who would then perhaps develop into a paid role and taking on more responsibility. But with a lot of volunteering opportunities going on hold during the pandemic, we kind of lost a bit of that. But also partly due to the nature of the work and the levels of trauma experienced by our community. And a lot of that being systemic, there's often not a lot can be done to get somebody out of that position. And a lot of the time, sadly, you might be working with somebody and not being able to give them the news they're hoping for. And this can have an impact on how long people stay in the work. So that causes a bit of a loss of the talent pool as well when it comes to retainment. And as with all smaller organisations, there's always a challenge in matching the terms and conditions and salaries that larger private companies can do, but obviously that's an issue throughout the third sector, not just for the advice sector. Some of the solutions we found are, we've done quite a bit of learning through our recruitment journey, and what we learned is that although the advice is quite specialist, that can be learned if people already have some advice skills or the right skills and values to train in advice work. People have applied who have maybe only worked in a benefits advice role, which doesn't apply to people in the asylum process, but they have those skills of doing professional reflective note-taking, of working and supporting individuals who are vulnerable to access their rights, and that is all very transferable, and the actual asylum specific stuff can be trained and learned. And similar to what the ladies from Rape Crisis were saying, somebody's value base is just as important as a lot of the other skills that they're needed. You could be the best advice worker in the world, but if you believe that the UK government's Rwanda scheme is a great idea, then you're never going to be a fit with our organisation. So that value base is so important with the work we do. We also offer a lot of volunteering opportunities. So that's one of the paths into advice and advocacy roles with us, is a lot of our staff members have came from our volunteer team. All of our jobs are recruited externally and advertised externally, but obviously if you've been working with organisations in a voluntary capacity, you already have that internal knowledge of how the organisation works, what our policies are, what our values are, and you're already working in that environment, and you've then got a bang up-to-date reference as well in that field of work. So a lot of it does come from our volunteers. We also actively promote recruiting people with lived experience of the asylum process, which brings another element to the work, and promotes the overall aim of the sector of supporting refugees to become involved in leadership in the refugee sector. So we have a huge focus on that, and how we can support people with their career development for that. This comes with added support requirements as well. And again, like Rape Crisis, we're saying a lot of the work is staff can really be impacted by vicarious trauma. So it's really important that the organisation is providing support for that, but we also encourage individuals to take personal responsibility for their self-care and their resilience as well. And that is something we do talk about during interview processes, is how do people look after themselves and manage their own well-being. And a lot of people in our advice team have came through career development roles, maybe not immediately going into an advice or an advocacy role, but maybe starting in a previous role. And I've given an example of somebody who started as a volunteer in GCP, not specifically in an advice role, but through their volunteering, they gained a greater understanding of the challenges faced by our community members. They started in our homework club, and through that they had some engagement with parents as well as the children, and they started to understand all of the challenges and barriers people were facing. They then started coming along to volunteer at our community welcome meeting, and then started to connect with our casework team through offering their time to help with some of the more basic casework tasks, like helping somebody get a new SIM card set up in their phone. And from that, there was then a vacancy came up for our advice helpline, and they were successful in getting the role of helpline assistant, where they are the first protocol for people phoning for the advice and advocacy service, but they are just taking the details and passing the information on and doing little bits of practical support and signposting. And then from that, they gain a better understanding of what the advice and the advocacy workers were doing. They then progressed on from the helpline assistant role to becoming an advocacy worker. And then whilst they were in the advocacy role, through further training and development in the role, being able to do their immigration regulation advice training, they were then upskilled, and then when a vacancy became available for a casework role 12 months later, they successfully interviewed for that role as well. So that was a kind of natural progression right through from volunteer to being part of the advice team as a caseworker. The tips we would give for job hunting, through our experience when we're shortlisting for a role, the candidates are who are most successful are those who've done a bit of research on what the organisation does and who our beneficiaries are. And even if you have no experience of the type of advice work that we're delivering, do a little bit of research on what might that advice look like if you were to be successful in the role, and do a little bit of research, because you never know if you might be presented with a case study or a role play as part of an interview process, and you want to make sure you're prepared for that. What we find a lot with people writing application forms is a lot of application forms give you a big bit of space at the end for you to fully evidence how your skills and experience match with the role, and a lot of people kind of skim over this bit in our experience. Our advice would be, if you've been given a job description with a person specification that gives you a list of the essential qualities we are looking for, and then others that would be added value, make sure your response evidences how you meet them, and don't ever forget to include your personal experiences and your volunteering experiences in that. We have reviewed applications from internal candidates who we know have much more experience than they've put in the application form, but if we're shortlisting on the basis of a forum, then it's really important that we shortlist from that and don't take prior knowledge. So make sure you really sell yourself during that process. Think about how you don't just match with the job, but that you match with the organisation as well. Obviously, coming back to values, if somebody's recruiting, they're looking for somebody who can not only do the job, but are also a good fit with the organisation and the team that's already in existence. So think about how you fit with the whole organisation. We're very aware some people are great at selling themselves on paper, but become a nervous wreck when it comes to an interview, and vice versa. Some people are really good at interview, but don't do a strong application. There are lots of employability support organisations out there. Use them. Get somebody to look over your CV, get somebody to practice an interview with you. And if you're not sure how well your skills fit, don't be afraid to make contact with the organisation and ask for an informal chat with somebody about the role to check that it's a fit with your skills. And yeah, I would also say maybe pay attention to closing dates. A lot of the organisations like ourselves don't have a lot of capacity, so we don't have the capacity to put back dates because we've received late applications. So don't miss out by not paying attention to a date as well. And if not every organisation will do this, but many will tell you at the advert stage when interviews are likely to happen. Make sure if you don't think you can meet those dates that you let people know as soon as possible. It'll be the same for many third sector organisations, but when we're recruiting, we will often be using a volunteer on the interview panel. So we have to pick set days around their availability. We won't always have the capacity to change that to accommodate somebody who can no longer make the date that we've set. But I can't advocate enough for volunteering as a way into employment pathways in a particular field, especially if it's a field you're really interested and passionate about getting into. So get out there and volunteer with an organisation. And that's me.
Thanks so much, Tracy. Interesting to hear about the challenges you face and your particular area of work with your client group, and also again just echoing the kind of career progressions in through on-the-job training and volunteering. We have had one question that was for Charlie, but unfortunately he's had to head off. So Erin, if you just email that over to me, I can pass that to him. So we've just got a couple of minutes left if anyone has any last minute questions. No, well, I think that's been a great session, just really shown what a kind of vital and rewarding area of work it is. So I'd just like to extend a huge thanks to all our speakers. And if you have any questions, please reach out to them directly or contact us on the Good Moves website. Thank you.